Okay, let's continue. We're still working our way through. We're in the early chapters of Exodus. We'll cover, I believe, we're right on track, and I think we'll cover quite a bit of Exodus, but it's these first chapters that I really want for you to grasp so you can have your foundation of what Exodus is all about. So let's read again from verse 11, and then we'll continue on all the way down to verse 22. Exodus chapter 2. Came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And we've talked through this now. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And he went out the next day, and behold, two Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, "Why are you striking down your companion?" And he said, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us?" Well, we know, just stop there for a moment, we know who made him a prince or a judge over us, over them. It's a very interesting way that the man says it. Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Who do you think you are, acting like you're a leader amongst us? Well, in Moses' mind, because I am a leader, I am the defender, I am the one who's going to deliver. That was in Moses' mind, but they didn't understand. Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and said, "Surely the matter has become known." When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "Why have you come back so soon today?" So they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and what is more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock." And he said to his daughters, "Where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat." And Moses was willing to dwell with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses. Then she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." Okay, so that's where Zipporah's name is mentioned in the scriptures, as she goes by Zori. Moses' wife. So Moses flees Pharaoh's palace, and he runs and he goes to the wilderness of Midian, and it's a desert, and it's southern desert. It's actually where Sinai is. Moses is living where he's going to be. He's living in the Sinai area where he will return with all of the people. And so these 7 daughters, and by way of information, I told you that my daughter Rachel went to heaven on July 4th, 2016. And before she went to heaven, she married Mark and gave us 3 baby girls. And Mark remarried, and now he has 4 more baby girls. So he has 7 daughters, in fact, just like this guy. But Ruth is pregnant for another child, and we'll see who comes out this time. So the 7 daughters go to water their flock, and the shepherds rise up to stop them. I don't know why. They're just abusing these women. So Moses stands up and rescues the women. So the women run back to Reuel, their father, also known as Jethro. Reuel is a name, Jethro is a title. Like Pharaoh is a title, Jethro is a title, Reuel is his name. And he's the priest of that area. Not the priest of the Most High God necessarily. We don't know who he's a priest for. And so the daughters go back to Reuel, their father, and he says, "How'd you get back here so soon today?" "Well, this Egyptian helped us water our flocks." How do they know he's an Egyptian? He's probably dressed like a prince of Egypt. So Reuel says, "Well, bring him here." And then Reuel gives Zipporah, his daughter, to him. And Moses then has his first son named Gershom, for have been a sojourner. The name Gershom means one who's a sojourner. And that's as far as we've gotten. And 40 years is now going to transpire. And he's going to have a second son, and his second son, his name is named Eliezer. Okay? Thoughts or questions? Where we are now? Because 40 years is now going to transpire. Okay, let's read the end of chapter 2. Very significant end. Verse 23. Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died. Keep in mind, we know the king of Egypt died. The guy who tried to kill Moses, Moses doesn't know it. He didn't receive a text message. Moses does not know that the king of Egypt died. You'll see that played out in the next 2 chapters. Moses doesn't know that the king of Egypt has died, but we know. Came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the sons of Israel sighed because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose up to God. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God saw the sons of Israel, and God took notice of them. Okay. Observations? Thoughts? This is very significant here. What do you see? Yes, God remembered his covenant. Well, it doesn't necessarily imply that he forgot. Did you remember to bring your Bible to class today? You didn't forget your Bible, you remembered your Bible. Yeah. But our initial response is what you said, but it really isn't saying that God forgot, it's saying he remembered. Really, that's what it's saying. You know when there's a rainbow in the sky, and in the guest teacher's suite, there's a picture, I assume it's of Kauai, and there's a rainbow in the picture? You know what the rainbow is? It's what? It's his promise that, well, it's not the promise. The rainbow isn't the promise, but he promised that he would never flood the world again, never destroy the world by flood. What's the rainbow? Pardon? It's a sign, actually. You can say symbol. It's a sign of that covenant. But what happens when that rainbow is in the sky? What, people remember? That's actually not its purpose.
Oh, is it to show that the sun is coming? Is the light?
Well, that's astronomically. Would that be an astronomical observation? What kind of physics?
Just scientific.
Scientifically, that's what it would be.
Chemistry,
Chemistry?
right? No? No, it's not.
It's science. We'll just go with science, the big category. Okay, so scientifically, yeah. But did that hurt either of you? That's pretty good. So actually, what God tells us is, when I see the rainbow, I will remember my covenant. It's actually not for us to remember. It's for God. Not that he would forget. It's just when we see the rainbow in the sky, we can know that God remembers his covenant to never flood the world again. He remembers. Okay. So he remembered, in this case, the children of Israel are groaning in their slavery, groaning in their suffering, and their groaning rises up to God. It doesn't say they're groaning and crying out to God. It just says they're crying out. It doesn't say they're crying out to God. It just says they're crying out. And it rises up to God, and then he remembers. Verse 25 4. What does he remember? Which covenant? With Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. He remembers his covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. Why would he say that? Why would God remembering his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob be an issue now? You know the answer to this. Why would that be mentioned now?
They're at the end of the 400 years.
They're at the end of the 400 years. And what's going to happen?
They're going to leave Egypt and take lots of things with them.
Right, they're going to leave Egypt and take the possessions. And how big is the nation?
Really big.
It's a great nation. And what's going to happen after they leave Egypt?
They're going to go to the promised land.
They're going to go to the promised land. That is all part of the covenant. You see, this is all part of the covenant. This whole event is part of the covenant. That time in Egypt was to make a great nation according to the covenant. Now, when you see those names with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when you see those three names together in the Bible, and they're in the Bible a lot, when you see those three names mentioned that way, think Abrahamic covenant. Because that's what it's talking about. When you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob like that, think Abrahamic covenant. And you know what the Abrahamic covenant is, right? What is it? What are the four, someone else, what are the four parts of the Abrahamic covenant that I wrote on the board? Land, great nation, the Messiah. Because what's the blessing everybody needs?
Salvation.
Right. So it's the Messiah. That's the Abrahamic covenant. Remember I told you that your faith rests on the Abrahamic covenant? Are you saved? Do you have eternal life? It's because of the Abrahamic covenant. So that's why I keep repeating this, keep mentioning this. Land, great nation, that whole bless those who bless you, curse those who curse, that's correct biblically. Just summarize in your mind, just say, keep them distinct, separate from the world, and the Messiah. Now, at the end of this 400 years of slavery, 400 years in Egypt, it's time, Messianic plan. It's time to get you to the land so the Messiah can come. Okay? Thoughts or questions before we move on to the burning bush? When I say burning bush, do you guys know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Did I turn this on? What am I saying? What's the burning bush? God speaks to Moses. Can you guys hear when the traffic goes by? If that door's open? Okay, good. Yeah. God speaks to Moses from a bush that's burning. Okay, so you ready? We're going to go through all of chapter 3 and most of chapter 4 just quickly, but I want you to see this burning bush conversation. This is all based on the Abrahamic covenant. This is all the Messianic plan. That's what this is. This is not an event. This is not about Moses. It's about the Messiah. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. I thought his name was Reuel. Didn't you see it mentioned Reuel there in verse 18, chapter 2? I thought he was Reuel. Now he's Jethro. Jethro is a title. Reuel is his name. His title is Jethro, is like the leader of the area. Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. Because bushes in that area, they were acacia bushes, and they would become, when the bush would die, it would just become sticks, little thin sticks. So you guys have all been at a campfire in your life? Okay. If you put little thin sticks and you throw it into the fire, it just kind of burns quickly and burns up quickly. Well, that's what happens with these acacia bushes. And in the wilderness, they spontaneously combust. It's so hot that they just burst into flame. So the bush on fire was not unusual. The bush not burning up was unusual. Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that Moses turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. He said, here I am. Now don't think that Moses has known the Lord this whole time, or don't think that Moses has this ongoing relationship with God this whole time. There's no indication that he has, other than he knows he was the deliverer. But he was raised in Egypt, amongst all their idols. They had a whole pantheon. They had 80 different gods in Egypt. This is almost like an introductory discussion between Moses and God. Moses, Moses, speaking from the bush. Here I am. He said, do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. What makes the place holy? The presence of the Holy One, God. God is in the bush. And he said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. What should you think? Abrahamic covenant. That's how God introduces this conversation. It's Abrahamic covenant time, Moses. Verse 6 again, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now it's interesting that he would say the God of your father, actually. Moses' father's name is? Anybody remember? You're close. You're getting started right anyway. Anybody remember Am? What's Moses' mother's name? Jochebed. And Moses' father's name is Amram. And God says, I'm the God of your father. But then he doesn't say Amram. He says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because Moses, you're a Jew, you are a Hebrew, and you are a child. You are part of the nation of Israel. You're not a Midianite. You're not an Egyptian. You are a Hebrew. You are part of this covenant. Then Moses hid his face, verse 6, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up to that land, to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite. Have you ever seen those names before? Where have you seen those names? Chapter? Genesis chapter? Genesis, what chapter? We read it today. 15. Genesis 15 is where those names are mentioned. I'm going to bring you, Abram. I'm going to give you that land. And here we are hundreds of years later. And God's telling Moses, we're going into that land. Are you seeing a path? Are you seeing the connection? If I leave you with anything, brethren, that's what I want you to have, is the Bible is connected to itself. Okay, the end of verse 8 again, to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite. And now, behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. Stop there. Okay, there's the commission. It's time. It's time to come out of Egypt. I'm sending you to bring them out. This is Abrahamic covenant, Moses. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is Abrahamic covenant, and I'm sending you to bring them out. It's time to get to the land. Moses, you're right. You were the deliverer. You still are the deliverer. You were just 40 years too early last time. That's all it is. Okay? Time for delivery. Thoughts or questions? Moses says no 5 times to God. All right, so he's just been commissioned. Moses, you go to bring my people out of the land. Look at verse 11. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Stop there. He objects 5 times. Objection number 1 is, who am I? Are you kidding? Me? I guess 40 years in the wilderness has caused him to forget, plus the bad response on the part of the children of Israel 40 years earlier has caused him to lose sight of the fact that you are the deliverer, Moses. So, who am I? Me? That's objection number 1. Let's look at God's response. It's a beauty. Verse 12. God said, certainly I will be with you, and this will be the sign that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God right here at this place, this mountain. What's God's response to Moses when Moses says, who am I? Verse 12, what does God say? I will be with you. I will be with you. Why didn't he say something like, you know, I can understand your hesitation. Maybe we should go for some counseling. The point is, do you remember the Abrahamic covenant? Do you remember the signing of the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis chapter 15? Who signed it? Moses, it doesn't matter who you are. God doesn't even answer. God doesn't even respond to Moses. Who am I? You're the deliverer. Your mother and father told you that. You knew it 40 years ago. God doesn't even respond to that because this whole covenant doesn't matter what Abram does, and it's not based in Moses. It's based in God. And God says, I will be with you. This is my responsibility to make this happen. And I guess we can kind of think the same thing. All we need is God to make anything happen. That's objection 1. Who am I? I will be with you. Let's read objection number 2. Then Moses said, behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I shall say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? What's objection number 2? Who are you? Who are you? Do you see that? What should I say to them? They may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Because gods always have names. What's your name? Who are you? That's objection number 2. Who are you? Let's see God's response. Verse 14. Then God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God's response? Yeah. I am. Yeah. That's what he said in Hebrew. It means I'm ever present, or the state of to be, the state of being. I am. Always. I am. That's who you can tell them I am. That's the name you can give to them. But he's going to give a different name in a little bit. Okay, who are you? That's who I am. That's the name you can give them. Verse 15, and God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. What should you think there? Abrahamic covenant. The God of the Abrahamic covenant has sent me to you. That's what you tell them. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Do you see? See how often he's saying this? Do you see how the role of the Abrahamic covenant has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So I said, I will bring you out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will pay heed to what you say, and you with the elders of Israel will come to the king of Egypt, and you will say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. Now here he doesn't say, when he's talking to Pharaoh, he doesn't say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because Pharaoh doesn't know Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But when you talk to Pharaoh, say, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So now please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not permit you to go except under compulsion. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my miracles, which I shall do in the midst of it, and after that he will let you go. And I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall be that when you go, you will not go empty-handed, but every woman shall ask of her neighbor and the woman who lives in her house articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and you'll put them on your sons and daughters, thus you will plunder the Egyptians. Is this a new idea? Is that a new idea? Of going and asking for articles of silver and gold and clothing? No? Pardon?
They said that they would leave with lots of stuff.
When was that stated? In Genesis chapter 15. I know. I keep repeating, don't I know. Genesis 15. All of this that's happening now is exactly what God told Abram would happen. We are hundreds of years later. Okay, any thoughts or questions? We still have 3 more objections to go. Moses saying no 3 more times to God. Incredible. Thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay. I am aware that there are limited people who are answering my questions. And I'm just glad the questions are being answered, but I keep looking around at all of you because I want all of you to have the opportunity to respond. So that's why I keep looking around at some of you, most of you who haven't said anything. You don't ever have to say anything, but I keep looking around so you can have the opportunity to respond. That's all. And I'll continue to do that. Okay? Anything before we move on to chapter 4? All right, objection number 3. Here we go. Then Moses answered and said, what if they will not believe me? Or listen to what I say, for they may say, the Lord has not appeared to you. What's objection number 3? What if they don't believe? What if they don't believe me? So objection 1, who am I? God says, that's not the point. I will be with you. Objection number 2, who are you? Tell them that I am. Objection number 3, what if they don't believe me? That you actually sent me. Verse 2, the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. Then he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. But the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grasp the serpent by the tail. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. Because that's the way you always want to grab a snake. No, you never want to grab a snake by the tail. But God said, grab the snake by the tail. This could be an asp. That's a very common poisonous snake in that area. It may very well have become an asp. And you don't grasp asps by the tail. Moses obeyed in this case. And it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Does God seem like he's being a bit repetitive? Have you noticed how many times he said Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? 4 or 5 thus far? Is God a bit repetitive? This whole plan of salvation rests totally on him. He's making it very clear that this is the plan of salvation. Verse 6. Okay, so what if they don't believe me? So God gives him a sign. He gives him 2 signs, actually. Here's the second sign. Verse 6. And the Lord furthermore said to him, now put your hand into your bosom. So he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, put your hand into your bosom again. So he put his hand into his bosom again, and when he had taken out of his bosom, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. It shall come about that if they will not believe you or heed the witness of the first sign, which is a staff becoming a snake, they may believe the witness of the last sign, which is leprosy. But it shall be, if they will not believe even those 2 signs, or heed what you say, then you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it out on the dry ground, and the water which you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. So what if they don't believe? Who am I? I'll be with you. Who are you? I am. What if they don't believe? I give you these 3 signs. Okay, 3 objections. Moses is in this conversation with God, objecting. Verse 10, objection number 4. Then Moses said to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant, for I am slow of tongue, slow of speech, and slow of tongue. What's objection number 4? What's that? He's not a good public speaker. I can't talk.
Doesn't it say in Acts that he was like wise in word and deed?
Sure does.
So how does that make any sense?
Well, the sense it would make would be that he was educated in the way of the Egyptians, Egyptian language. So this is how I work it through in my own mind, Zori, is I say, I think. This is how I think. That he spoke Hebrew until he was about 5. Then he spoke Egyptian until he was 40. And then he spoke in the language of the Midianites for the last 40 years. Now he has to go back and speak to the Hebrews. I'm slow of tongue. And I know what that is. Because I'll be going, God willing, I'll be going to Israel in a month. And I know what it is to be slow of tongue in Hebrew. So it's possible that that's what he's talking about. It's possible. Yeah.
I've heard it that like he was wise and educated, but he had like a stutter or something, so it was just hard for him to communicate his ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But that he was still like of advanced thinking.
Yes. And because that word could be seen as stutter, slow of tongue, right? I have a dentist, he's a close friend actually, who when I'm talking to him, it takes a long time for him to get the words out. Maybe some of you know people who stutter. We actually had 2 people in our church who stuttered when I was raising the children. Both of them played the keyboards, and they both stuttered, and one was a pharmacist and one was a dentist in Estes Park. So that word could be seen as stutter. But the passage that Zori was pointing out does say he was powerful in word as well. So it raises that question, really. So the best way for me, I mean, ultimately I'll find out when I get to heaven, I guess, but the best way for me to understand it is, he's basically, in fact, I was speaking with somebody recently who was he was born in one country and he spoke one language, and then he's been this many years away from it, and it's very hard for him to get back to even the language he was born into for the first number of years. Was your hand up?
Yeah, and also do you think it could be just if the Lord is giving him his speech, then the words that he's saying is going to be powerful because it's not coming from his own power, it's coming from God's.
That's a very good observation as well. He was powerful based on, because what Stephen is saying is after the fact of everything happening. So he was very powerful when he spoke to Pharaoh. That's what you're saying? Yeah. It's a good thought. Anyway, that's objection 4. Let's see God's response. Verse 11. The Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes him dumb or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now then go, and even I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say." So what's God's response again? It's really kind of the same thing. I will be with you. And anyway, I'm the one who made your mouth. I will be with you. And I'm the one who made your mouth anyway. All right, that's 4 objections. 1 more to go. Is this not an incredible conversation going on here? Talking to God in the bush? Verse 13. This is the final objection. But Moses said, "Please, Lord, now send the message by whomever thou wilt." You know what he's saying? He's saying, send someone else. Send someone else. I don't know. There's a reason this is the last objection. Verse 14. Here's the reason. Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses. That's why it's the last objection. The Lord is now angry. He allowed him 5 times, and the anger of the Lord burned. Enough. You're going. You're going. You're going. Stop the conversation. Okay, verse 14. Then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, "Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. And you are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I, even I, will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. Moreover, he shall speak for you to the people, and it shall come about that he shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be as God to him. And it shall be, and you shall take in your hands this staff with which you shall perform the signs. Stop there. So Aaron is coming. Aaron's already actually on his way, and Moses is going to speak to Aaron, and Aaron is going to speak to the people. So do you know the definition of a prophet? Pardon?
One who speaks for God.
One who receives from God and then speaks to the people. You have to receive from God and then speak to the people. That's a prophet. Aaron is going to be like the prophet. Moses will speak to Aaron, and then Aaron will speak forth. That's why God says in verse 16, and you shall be as God to him. You will speak to Aaron and give him the words that he should speak to the people. Okay, that's the burning bush. And did you see how many times the Abrahamic covenant was a part of the burning bush? The burning bush is not about a bush, and it's not about Moses, and it's not about Aaron. It's about the whole point of the Abrahamic covenant. And what's the whole point of the Abrahamic covenant? Let me refine that. Who's the whole point of the Abrahamic covenant? The Messiah. The Messiah. Okay, let me see the time.
Oh, 10:52.
Okay. Thoughts or questions? Okay, take 10. 11:02.